everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's your girl Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a quick pattern review and then also a sew along for hashtag battle of the shirt dress. This one will be new look pattern. And of course, you guys know it's pattern hackathon. I'm going to share with you a very small hack that I did for another pattern as well. I like to do two for the price of one. And also, this make is also part of hashtag hot girl summer that's going on until the end of the month.
I got it like that. Yeah, I got it like that. I got it like that. Baby, I'm a big deal, I got it like that. I did it again, who told you that I was finished? Fresh off the plane.
So, if you are new to the channel, welcome. Hello, Ciao, Guten, Aloha, Hola, Konnichiwa, Gwaan, Sabonani, Shalom, Bonjour, Terve. If you are returning, you guys know what to do. Quick snack, something to drink, grab the notebooks just to take notes, okay? So, without further ado, to keep this video short, sweet, to the point, give you all the deets and the news that you can use on this video, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so first things first, I'm gonna talk about the cami first, and then we're gonna go ahead and get into the button-down shirt that I created. So I took it off so you're able to see it better on camera. So the first things I'm gonna talk about is Butterick 7001. Now you guys know I have a complete pattern review and a sew along for both the cami that I turned into a dress, or camisole, slip dress, whatever you wanna call it, for the pattern hackathon, which is still going on. And when you're seeing this video, new week just started, okay? So we have the last week. Well, this is the last week before the bonus week, which means you need to be following Yoga Bird. Yes, Yoga from Yoga Bird and Shantae from Sewing for My Sanity. All right. Those are the two ambassadors that's going to be coming up this week, starting today. Also, if you miss any of my girl Diana from 26 by Diana, as well as Shells from Shells Creates, make sure you go over to Instagram, check out their reels, because y'all missed a lot if y'all missed that week. And today is the last day for the Ankara Appreciation Week. Now, I'm not going to even lie. Your girl was feeling down for 5 days and didn't get my post for it or my photos together. So your girl didn't do it. But just know, next year, your girl is going to be riding all week with makes. All right. So let's go ahead and get into Butterick 7001 quick. I'm not even doing a pattern review. I'm just going to do a reveal of the cami. All right. So you guys know that I'm going to put the picture up where I created the cami dress. All right. Cami turned cami dress for the pattern hackathon. Then I decided, I was like, I got some fabric left over from the print. So I went ahead and created, of course, y'all know I created the cami for it. And of course, y'all know I installed the shelf bra for it. So, and it also has ties. Now I have not taken pictures in it because I took pictures in the cami dress. Y'all don't need to see the cami dress and the cami in pictures. So, but I like it. It fits. I used the rest of the entire fabric. I probably have like a yard left. So I'm going to make like a wallet or a wristlet, or for that 1 yard, I could create something, you know, in order to use it. I'll probably just use it as some scraps, but that's what I'm going to do for that. Let's go ahead and talk about the button-down shirt. So for the button-down shirt, as part of hashtag battle of the shirt dresses, also hashtag hot girl summer, you could say is hashtag pattern hackathon. However, I'm not going to put this in pattern hackathon because I didn't necessarily do a hack. I just did a style change. And pattern hackathon, you have to do some form of a hack. I did not do a actual hack to the pattern. It was just kind of like changing a couple of things. And to me, it wouldn't be considered a actual hack with just basically adding some, you know, using some scrap fabric for the neckband. That's the only thing that I did differently than what the pattern stated, or adding another button. That's not necessarily a hack. That is just a style change. So I'm not going to tag this as hashtag pattern hackathon. But if I would have done something that was actually a hack, I would have tagged it. But this is the pattern that I'm using. Now it has a rack number of D0935, but the new look pattern is new look 6561. Pattern number 1 of the Battle of the Shirt Dress. You guys know Battle of the Shirt Dress is going on until September 20th, okay? Once again, it is going on. I said it was for the spring and the summertime. And I'm telling you guys, Rochelle is behind the scene working on all these shirt dresses to give to you guys by September 20th, okay? Now, if you missed C from We See Styles video, she's been talking about how she gonna sew up some shirt dresses, part of my challenge. Thank you so much, Candace, AKA C from We See Style. Check her out. I'm gonna link to it in the description box below. You're welcome, all right? All right, so first thing first, new look 6561 also hashtag hot girl summer is still going on until the end of the month. But let's get into the pattern description. Now, you guys know your girl is going to give her own pattern description because, of course, on simplicity.com, new look does not give a really good description. So this is a button down shirt, you know, one of those must have in any wardrobe. It features 3 different shirt options. So view A, which is the view that I did, it features huge freaking pockets on the side. You can wear it as like an open shirt. You can wear it down as a button down shirt. You can even wear it as a dress. I did not do that simply because for me, I used an orange and it was a little see-through and I didn't want to take those chances, okay? So I like that. It does have kind of like a drop sleeve as well. I like that as well. Now view B is just your standard classic shirt that features 2 pockets. It also has slits up the side there, and then it just has kind of like a cuff there. View C is a short sleeve with a sleeve band for that view. It also has a collar as well, which we call it a stand collar instead of a round collar. And those are the 3 views that you have on this pattern. Let's talk about sewing skill level. So in terms of the sewing skill level, I'm going to rate this pattern as intermediate. Let me say something about intermediate. If you are a beginner, I'm going to say this, and I'm not trying to be rude whatsoever. If you are a beginner, do not attempt an intermediate pattern if you are not familiar with buttonholes and zippers and how to do a lot of interfacing. You're not completely there yet. And the reason why I say this, and you guys know I'm not being mean or rude or whatever. Reason being is because when you're following with my sew-alongs, it is for you. I try to make the sew-alongs as beginner friendly as possible. However, I've been told in the last couple of sew-alongs that it's not a sew-along, and I'm not calling nobody out. But the reason why I don't, and I'm sharing this now because it's been said in so many of my last sew-alongs. The reason why I don't share the sewing machine or me sewing at the sewing machine is simply because we're just sewing in a straight line. I didn't know I needed to share how to sew in a straight line. Now, in this video, I am sharing me going back and forth to the sewing machine, okay? So, before you even say it's not a sew-along, it is a sew-along. And anytime someone is sharing the entire process from start to finish, whether they're showing a sewing machine or not, it is an entire sew-along. I mean, comment below if you think that it's not a sew-along because I'm not sharing the sewing machine. I'm just saying. But like I was saying, this one is a complete sew-along. I'm going to share the table. I'm sharing the sewing machine. But moving forward, any intermediate patterns, I will not be sharing going back and forth to the sewing machine. If you are doing an intermediate pattern with me, or you following a sew-along and it's an intermediate pattern and it's something that you get tripped up with, of course, I'm going to respond and help you out. But just know I can't help you out on things like buttonholes or how did you do the placket and all of that good stuff, simply because intermediate patterns are for those that are intermediate. I try to make these intermediate sew-alongs as beginner friendly as possible. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the next thing. Let's talk about the notions used. So in terms of the notions used, from the back of the pattern, 6 1/2-inch buttons. Now, let me tell you something that Rochelle did. Rochelle lost the buttonhole guide for this pattern, for the size that I cut. I don't know how in the world I did it, but I do know. I don't know, but I do know. So I don't know simply because everything was together, but I do know because Rochelle started this pattern as of June the 23rd. And we are now on July 19th, Friday, July 19th. And let's just say after it's been put aside for 2.5, almost 3 weeks, things could go missing, okay? But what I'm saying is that it went missing with moving from table to over here, depending on if I'm filming at the sewing table or if I'm sewing over here or I'm filming. I'm not going to have a whole bunch of stuff cluttered behind me. I can't deal with clutter. You guys know that I have said that before. So that's that or whatnot. But I had to use a buttonhole guide from Simplicity 9756. So that's also on my cutting table. I shared that with you guys in the batch cutting, and I'll be sharing another batch cutting video with you guys simply because I am now working on my yellow board and I have 2 things already done. So I'll be sharing those with you guys here shortly. All right, let's go ahead and move over to the fabric used. So the fabric used for this one is from the stash, of course, and it's this yellow. I'm colorblind. It is not yellow. It is orange. So it is this orange broadcloth fabric that I had in my stash, and it actually matches to the T the Ankara fabric that I showed you for Butterick 7001, where I made the slip dress, aka camisole cami dress, right? And I also made New Look 6532, which was the 2-hour pants that I did a complete sew along for. I will put it up here so you're able to see it, but I'll also drop it in the description box below as well. So this is the fabric from the stash. Yes, I still have dots on it or whatever. The buttonholes are completed. I just didn't feel like completely button it up for the photos, okay? Do what you do with it, all right? Let's talk about pattern pieces. So you guys, let me say that it's not like one of those quick sews. I'm gonna be honest, completely 100% honest with you. You can get it done in one day. I'm not gonna lie there. However, in terms of pattern pieces for view A, it's 10 pattern pieces. And you have the front, the back, the loop, the yoke back, pockets, collar, neckband, sleeve, sleeve band, and ties, and then your buttonhole guide. So it's 10 pieces in order to construct this entire button-down shirt. Let's talk about pattern sizing. So on the pattern envelope, you have one size, of course, for New Look patterns. Most of them are one size, and the size is 8 to 20. The size that I cut is the biggest size there is because dealing with the boobs, the hips, I needed to cut the biggest size. However, I didn't have to do any grading. I don't remember doing any grading. I believe I cut it, and remind you, I'm doing this pattern review 3 weeks later. So I believe I cut the size 20, no grading or anything from the pattern, but we will discuss that when it comes time for the sew along. All right, let's talk about modifications. Did I make any modifications? Nope. I just cut it straight out of the package, no modifications at all. Let's talk about first time experiences. Do I have any first time experiences? No. 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 There's no, well, let me put it like this. There's no first time experiences, but I do not have anything in my wardrobe with pockets like this. It is not difficult to do whatsoever, but it is different than what I would normally do with a shirt with a big freaking pocket like this. All right. So that was a little different, but other than that, there's nothing, you know, different about what I have done. Let's talk about, did it look like the photos or the drawing on the pattern envelope? Yeah, it does, to be honest with you. It's just bright. But I wore this to work today and I got so many compliments on it. And many people asked me if I would make one for them. Now, come on, you know, your girl do not sew for anyone. I barely sew for my kids and I don't make anything for my husband. So Did you think that I took some orders? Nah, we not taking orders over here. I will sew something for someone once in a blue moon. I shared the story about why I don't sew anything for anybody because I made a prom dress for someone many years ago, probably almost a decade ago, and I'll just put it like this. You can't get me to do prom dresses or nothing for no one else because that was a disaster. If you missed Mandy's from Mandy's Threads video on how she had a horrible experience making something for someone on a timeline and they act like they don't want to pay you, go watch that video. I'm going to put her link in the description box below. I'm just going to say you're going to fall out laughing. So make sure you don't have anything in your mouth when you watch the video. All right. Let's talk about, are the instructions easy to follow? To be honest, for the most part, yes. Did I follow the instructions is a different story. I'm going to say, for the most part, I did not follow I followed the instructions, but did not follow the instructions. And what I mean by that is because everyone know that like most of these instructions are, you guys will call it trash, garbage, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to say a lot of the instructions are very difficult for a beginner to follow. So that's why I try to take the ease out of it of doing a sew along for you guys. However, let me say this. I'm going to take a pause for the cause. If you made it this far, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you have not done already so I can bring you more content like this. Also, there is a super thanks button. Thank me, tip me, say congratulations for bringing you guys content like this of a sew along. Because listen, it costs and it takes a lot of times for these sew alongs. So if you want me to continuously bring you guys sew along, help me out, okay? Help me out, all right? All right, so anyway, let's go ahead and talk about likes and dislikes. So I really don't have any dislikes for this pattern whatsoever. I think the only dislike for me would be the sleeves. And what I mean by that is this is the drop sleeve. So the sleeve like starts all the way down here. I'm used to my sleeve starting right at the shoulder. It's not a dislike per se, but I mean, I could have adjusted and that would have been a pattern hack, but I didn't. I just wanted to sew it out of the package because I didn't know if I was going to like it or not. Okay, with the big pockets on the side. But it actually turned out really cute, really amazing. I like that. Let's talk about, would I sew it again? No. And I wouldn't sew view A again because I think one and done is good for me. I also didn't like the fact of the hem. Me, I'm just not one of those that's the shirt tail hem. I think a straight hem is what I would prefer. I'm going to say if you're making a shirt tail hem, that's the curve hem, use bias tape. It is super easy if you do it that way versus trying to fold it up and hem it and all of that good stuff. All right. But I don't feel like I would need to sew this again. I have tons of button down shirt patterns that I could use. And I'm just going to put a big blurb right here. So in 2025, I want to make a lot of button down shirts. So I think I'm going to be doing quite a bit of lives going on in 2025 I'm telling you guys now, I will announce it next year, but stay tuned for it because I think I'm going to be doing a series on button down shirts. I'm not going to tell you any patterns. You will see it when the flyers go up during that time, but it will be live and I'm only going to do like 2 hours. It's going to be a sew along, but not necessarily a sew along. It's going to be, some of them it's going to be just kind of like a watch me sew, hang out with me. And then some of them is going to be kind of like a dive and sew along. The lives will not be no more than an hour and a half, 2 hours max. Why? Because it's just a lot of work with it. And some of it will be pretty much the same thing, techniques for any button down shirt. So stay tuned for camp shirts, okay, series. All right. Or button down shirt series. Even though going into 2025, I don't think I'm going to be doing battle of the shirt dress. I think I want to skip a year or two and then come back to it. But I think that I will be doing just your standard button down shirts to have more in my wardrobe. But we'll see going into 2025. We are only halfway through the year. All right. Recommendations. Would I recommend this pattern to others? Absolutely. That's why I did a complete sew along for this one as well. And let's talk about my pattern rating. So for this pattern, I'm going to stamp this pattern a 4 out of 5. I like it for sure, but I would highly advise you to do view C on the pattern. Yes, I did view A. I like it. I like the big pockets. It's very different, but for me, I would not wear it all the way down, like button up all the way down. I would always wear it pretty much open with the shirt underneath. And it's not because of the color. It's just, I think that's what works best for me. Now, I'm thinking of doing a hack for this pattern. I don't know, to be honest with you. But what the model is wearing is view C, like your classic shirt. I think for me, for recommendations, I would say make the classic shirt view C for sure. Well, that's it for the pattern review. I hope you enjoyed. Now stay tuned for the sew along. So let's go ahead and get right on over to the sew along. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the next sew along as part of Hot Girl Summer for New Look Patterns. And this one is one that you guys been bugging me about since I shared that I had this pattern. Okay, so no one really done this pattern, and I'm sorry if there's a glare on this pattern, but the rack number is D as in Delta 0935. I'll put it up on the screen, but it's New Look 6561. It came out in the summer of 2018. Many ladies have done a pattern review, but this is one that I don't know how many times I have gotten a request for a sew along for this pattern. So I decided that since I am doing Hot Girl Summer for New Look Patterns and I was making a button down shirt, pull this one out to kill 2 birds in 1 stone. All right. So that's what that is. So let's go ahead and get into the instructions for this pattern. All right, so looking at the instructions for this pattern, I think you need about 8 pattern pieces if I remember correctly, but let me go ahead and get these instructions. Now, I am doing view A. So let me show you the pattern. I am doing this view with the green and the pink on the pattern. And the reason why is because I could literally tie it up. I could make it long. When I say I can make it long, I could wear it as a dress. I could wear it open. I could wear it closed. I could tie it. I could do so many things with view A. I thought about doing view C, what the model is wearing, because I like that view, but I might do that at a later time as well. All right, so that's the view that I'm doing. I'm doing view A, and the entire instructions are the same. It's just length variations as well as pocket and sleeve variations. That's it. But if you follow along with this tutorial for view A, you should be able to do view B and view C with just slight minor changes. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the pattern pieces you will need for this sew along. So for this one, you will need pretty much the same pieces. I am doing view A, so I need pattern piece number 1 through 10, which would be your front, your back, your loops, your yoke back, your pockets, which goes on the side of your top or button down shirt, whatever you want to call it. And this will be used as hashtag battle of the shirt dress as well. And you see, I'm sorry, number 6 is the collar, 7 is the neckband, 8 is the sleeve, 9 is the sleeve ties, and 10 is the buttonhole for this pattern. All right, so I'm not going to get into the entire instructions for this because we're going to be doing a complete sew along for it. I will be. So therefore, let's go ahead and get into the tools and supplies that you need for this pattern. Now, one thing that I always say is I have a complete sew along for the sewing toolkit that you will need for any of my sew along. So the only thing I'm going to tell you is go to that video, which after you see this, go to that video, see what you need in your toolkit. I have said this numerous of times for all of my sew-alongs that everything that you will need will be in that toolkit. The only thing that you need is 6 1/2-inch buttons. Now I do have some orange buttons, which is what I will be using for this sew-along. I'm also using just some regular orange cotton fabric from my stash, all right, that I've been having for probably about 2 years now, okay, because I made my sister a jacket and had some leftover orange, and it's going to go with some pants that I made, okay, which is New Look 6532, which I will be sharing with you guys as well. I don't know which video is going to be first, but anyway, back to what I was saying. Let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces that you will need in order to construct this button-down shirt or top, whichever one you want to do. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct New Look 6561, the shirt dress or the button-down shirt, whichever one you want to make. It's up to you. So the first pattern piece, now I have traced off my pattern piece only because I am doing a size 16. If I want to make this again, I have already traced like the front, the back, the collar, the yoke pattern piece, and the neckband. Everything else, I did that simply because if I lose weight, I have a smaller size. If I gain weight, which we're not trying to gain weight, we're trying to lose weight, I have what I need. If I wanted to make this for someone else, I have already traced out my sides. I could definitely trace out someone else's sides as well. Make sure you transfer all your notches and your marking as well. But this one is pattern piece number 1, which is the front, which I'm going to turn this way so you're able to see it. But this is the front of the shirt dress or shirt. You need to cut to a fabric like I just mentioned. Make sure you mark your notches, your dots, and all of your markings for that, all right? So that's pattern piece number 1. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 2. Take note that the right side of your pattern piece needs to be laid on the wrong side of your fabric and cut all the way around. Also on pattern piece number 2, which is the back, it needs to be cut on the fold. And one thing I will mention, now it says cut 2 on the fold of fabric, but I think that's an error. You only need to cut 1 on the fold of fabric. I don't know why you would need 2, but it should be cut 1 on the fold of fabric. Make sure you mark your pleat line as well. And if you notice, on the pleat line, I have it going to the side seam instead of to the front. All right, so both of your pleats need to go to the side seam. When we get to that part, I'll show you what to do. All right, but this is pattern piece number 2. Make sure you only cut 1 on fold of fabric. Next pattern is pattern piece number 3, your loop. You need to cut 1 of fabric. This pattern piece is pattern piece number 4, which is your yoke back. I want to correct myself. I cut a size 14 for my top, okay? So you need to cut 1 of your yoke, all right? Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 5. This is your pockets. You need to cut 4 of your pockets, 2 for the front, 2 for the back. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 6. This is your collar. You need to cut 2 of fabric and make sure you interface 1 of your collar piece, okay? Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 7, which is your neckband. You need to cut 2 of fabric and interface 1. Now, one thing I want to mention about the neckband is that I use contrast for my facing neckband. So whichever one that if you're going to do the same thing I did, the main one that's going to be showing on the outside as the neckband, you need to interface that one. The inside one that's going to be like your accent for your inside of your neckband, you need to make sure you do not interface that one, all right? But this is pattern piece number 7, your neckband. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 8, which are your sleeves. And you need to cut 2 of fabric, depending on what line. I am doing view A, like I said, so I'm going to be following the gathers and the dots and all that good stuff, okay? So this is pattern piece number 8. You need to cut 2 of fabric. And the last pattern piece that you need to cut is pattern piece number 9, which are your sleeve band and tie ends. You need to cut 2 of fabric, all right? So those are all the pattern pieces that you will need in order to construct New Look 6561. So let's go ahead and get the sewing by grabbing pattern piece number 1, which are your front pattern pieces now. All right, go ahead and grab pattern piece number 1, which are your front pattern pieces. And what we're going to do is go ahead and fold it in our buttonhole area or our placket area. All right. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and put some interfacing on the portion that says interfacing. So let me grab my pattern piece. So I want to show you where you're going to put the interfacing. So you see this portion right here where it says fold line for interfacing. You're going to put a strip of fabric about, I want to say it's about an inch. Yes, about an inch wide of an inch wide of interfacing all the way down where it says fold line for interfacing, okay? That's what I did. Now, I made a clip at the very top and the very bottom. So what you're going to do is fold it in, that's 1 inch right here, and then you're gonna fold it in again where it says fold line for facing. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like. Now remind you, I make clips. So let me grab my ironing board, my table board, I should say. So I'm just gonna show you, I'm gonna lay it flat, but normally I have it up, but I'm gonna lay it flat so you guys could see this. And I'm going to take this is the wrong side facing up. And because I have clips, I know where it needs to be folded in. So the first thing I'm going to do is fold it into the first clip that I have. And I'm going to press all the way down. Now that I have the fold line for the interfacing press, now I'm going to press in one more time. And that's going to be the facing. So I'm just going to press in one more time. That's where the clips are that I have at the top. And I'm going to make sure that I press all the way down. Now I have a clip at the bottom as well, right here. So I'm going to make sure that I press in that portion as well without going over. So I want to make sure that it's straight all the way from the top to the bottom. All right, so now that I have it pressed in, I'm gonna go ahead and pin. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is before you do this, before you pin it, make sure you stay stitch. Stay stitch is done at 1/4 of an inch in the instructions. However, I stay stitch the front of my collar area at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and pin this on the wrong side. So grab my pins, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pin, because I'm just going to base this in place from the hem all the way up to the top portion of my shirt. All right, so go ahead and pin the placket area in place now. All right, so now that I have it pinned in place, all I'm going to do, I'm not going to back stitch, but I'm just going to base as close to the press edge as possible. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have pattern piece number 1, the front, I have the placket area. This is considered your placket where your buttonholes are going to be. I have it basted. That's what I have right here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and move this out of my way. Grab pattern piece number 2, which is your black. And what we're going to do are the pleats. So you should have cut pattern piece number 2 on the fold of your fabric. And I'm just going to make sure I write a 2 for the wrong side of my fabric. All right. Now I'm going to flip it over so you could see, only because you guys are always in my comments with Rochelle, how do you know? How do you know? All right, so this is what we're going to do. Most of the time, your pleats are always going to go to your side seam. So instead of doing from here to the center, more than likely, you're going to be doing from the center to the side seam for your pleats. So you see how this is the center of your back, and the pleat is going to the right. When you flip it over, the pleat is going to go to the left. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna turn it this way, and I'm going to go from that clip, and I'm going to pin it to the other clip that I made close to that dot. And then I'm going to pin just like so, just like this. All right. Now I have a clip right here that I made. So I have two clips where my pleats are. So I made a clip right here at one line and a clip right here at the other line of my pleat. Then that way I know where it goes. So now this clip is going to go over to the other clip that I made. And you see how it forms a pleat? And then I'm going to pin this one in place as well. And all I'm going to do is go to the sewing machine and baste across. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to move pattern piece number 2 out of the way. I'm going to baste it and press it down, okay? But first, before we do that, because you guys know I like to cut down on how many times I go to the sewing machine, grab pattern piece number 3, which is your loop. Now, this is optional. You do not have to do this part if you do not want to. Now, me personally, I'm not going to put this loop on, but I'm just going to show you how to do it, all right? So, with right sides together, you're going to fold your loop in half lengthwise, just like you see me doing here. And you're going to sew using a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Once you do that, turn it right side out, okay? Once you turn it right side out, I'm just going to kind of show you what it's going to look like. I don't want the loop on mine, so that's why I'm not doing it. But after you baste pattern piece number 2, which is the back, and you have this like this, it's going to form a loop, and you're going to basically pin right here and baste it across while you're basting across pattern piece number 2, okay? So it's going to form a loop just like that, all right? I don't want it, so that's why I'm not going to do it, but I just wanted to tell you that if you want that loop in the back, all right? So go to your sewing machine and just baste across. You do not have to backstitch at the beginning or at the end at all. Let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the back pleat done, the next, and pressed down, the next thing we're gonna do is our yoke back. All right, so I'm gonna move the pattern piece number 2 out of the way for a second. Just move it off to the side. Grab pattern piece number 4, okay? Now, a couple of things I wanna mention about pattern piece number 4. The seam allowance at the neck edge is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So what you want to do to alleviate pulling out stitches at a later time, you want to stay stitched at about a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I started in the center, went to one end, flipped it over, still starting at the center using a 1/4 of an inch, go to the opposite direction, all right? Now, on the pattern instructions, it tells you to cut one of the yoke back. However, if you want a yoke facing, meaning that if you want the yoke on the inside to do the burrito method, you can do the burrito method, which is what I'm going to be doing in this sew along. But you can cut two to where you have a facing on the inside. And if you want to put like a label or whatnot, you can put that label on the facing. So you have one on the outside and then one on the inside. You can cut another piece to have that yoke facing. Now for me, because it's hot here in Orlando, I'm not going to cut a second yoke back for a yoke facing. I'm just gonna leave it as one because I want this to be lightweight, number one. And plus I'm gonna probably put a shirt underneath it anyway. Number 2, I don't have much fabric to cut left to cut another yoke back piece, all right? Just to be honest. So let's go ahead and do the yoke back. We're gonna attach it to pattern piece number 2, which is our back. Now I have already marked the wrong side of my fabric. So grab pattern piece number 2, right side facing up towards you. That's where you have the pleat pressed in place. And then what you want to do is the bottom of your yoke. This is how you want to have it. So make sure you have it matched up. And then what you want to do is with right sides together, you want to pin those double notches at the bottom. All right, so go ahead and pin that double notch. I'm going to pin at the end. And then I'm going to pin the other side where the other double notches are. Pin at the end once again. And then I'm just going to pin across the bottom portion of my yoke piece in place. So go ahead and pin your yoke to your back pattern piece now. All right, so now that I have the yoke back pinned to the back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew your seam in place. Once you do that, finish off your seam allowance however you choose to finish it, and then press your seam allowance up towards the yoke. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the yoke back pinned onto the back, I went ahead and serged my edge, finished off my edge. Now what I'm going to do is press the seam allowance up towards the yoke. So I'm going to grab my table top ironing board, and I'm just going to press that in place just like so. So I'm just going to put it on my table. Now, one thing I want you to do is use your seam roll. It helps with the way that your garment looks. So grab your seam roll if you have one and then press it in place now. So I'm going to grab my seam roll. I have it right here, and I'm just going to press this in place now. So now that I have my yoke pressed all the way across, the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to move this off to the side just real quick, but not too far. I'm going to grab pattern piece number 5, which are your pockets, and we're going to attach it to the front and the back. Now I'm going to write the number 5 to make sure it symbolizes the wrong side of my pocket pattern pieces. Now, if you are not doing view A and you are doing view B or C, you will skip this step. So just hang tight if you are not doing this portion. All right. So I'm just going to turn my back to the side, and you have 2 dots and you have a notch. So what you want to do is make sure that you have right sides together. Okay. So this is the right side. I'm going to flip it over. I see the wrong side facing up towards me. And what I'm going to do is match that notch just like this. And I'm going to pin just like this. And then the dots should match up as well. So you're just going to pin your pockets in place. You're going to pin the pockets in place for both your front and your back. So go ahead and pin the pockets in place for both your front and back pattern pieces now. All right, so now that I have the pockets pinned on the back, I'll do the front in just a moment. But using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, I'm going to back stitch at the beginning, so all the way down to the end of the pocket, using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch. After I do that, I'm going to go ahead and finish off about 1 inch above and below my pockets on both sides for both the front and the back pattern piece. Once I do that, I'm going to understitch only on my front pocket pieces. I do this every time I make pockets. You guys have seen me do this before. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the pockets pinned on, this is my back pattern piece. As you can tell with the yoke and the back pattern piece. All right, so I'm gonna straighten this out. Now we're gonna attach our front pockets to the back pockets. So grab your front pattern pieces and with right sides together, you want to match up your pockets, okay? So you should have pressed your pockets to your seam allowance towards the pockets, and this is what it's going to look like. So let me turn it so you can see it better. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach our pockets with right sides together and making sure that you pin at that dot. The dot should match up. And then you want to pin at this other dot too, but I'm going to make sure that everything match up evenly before I pin there. So I'm going to pin there as well. And then I'm going to pin where that dot is, which is right here. There's a reason for it. And then you want to pin around your pocket. So you have notches at the bottom. You want to pin there. And then you want to pin all the way around your pocket, making sure that the raw edges meet up perfectly. So go ahead and pin around your pocket on both sides now. All right, so now that I have the pockets pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, I'm going to back stitch at this dot. So I'm not going to use this dot. I'm going to use this dot, back stitch at this dot. So all the way around my pocket and come all the way down and end at this dot right here. Okay. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Once you do that, finish off your pocket pattern piece. All right. So go ahead and do that now. First of all, let me correct something before you do the pockets. Let's go ahead and attach the side seams. Okay, so don't attach your shoulder seam. Let's go ahead and attach your side seam first before we do the pockets. I forgot to mention that. So what you want to do is go ahead and pin your side seams now. So I'm going to turn it back to the side. We already have our pockets pinned, but let's go ahead and pin the side seam before we go ahead and stitch up our pockets. Okay. So leave your pockets alone for just 1 second, pin your side seam, and we're going to sew our side seam first. So we want to do this. So I'm going to pin the side seam in place now. Go ahead and do that now. So now that I have the side seam pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to back stitch at the beginning, sew to this dot, back stitch at this dot, break my threads, then start at this dot right here, back stitch at this dot, and sew all the way down. I'm going to do that on both sides, okay? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the side seam done, we're going to go ahead and do the pockets. Now this portion, I'm going to actually show you a little bit at the sewing machine. Now you guys know that I normally do not film at the sewing machine because it's a process of editing, making sure I have the clips where they need to be and all that good stuff, with 2 separate cameras. So that's why I normally do not show this step, but I'm going to show you this step because this is probably where you guys would get hung up on sewing this pattern together. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come out about 1/4 of an inch and sew down the 1/4 of an inch. Now, do not have both of your pockets together like this. What you want to do is have the front pocket to the front and the back pockets moved out of the way. So you should have an opening like this. And then what you want to do, go ahead and press your front pocket, this is the front, in place. Move your back pocket out of the way. And then what you're going to do is just pin on the front. So this is the front right here on this side. And I'm just going to pin this in place just like this. Okay. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to come out 1/4 of an inch and go down 1/4 of an inch and come back in at this dot 1/4 of an inch. That's it. Okay. So I'm going to show you a little bit of this at the sewing machine. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to stitch our front pocket in place at 1/4 of an inch, just like a slant 1/4 of an inch. Make sure that you do not have your back pocket there, okay? So make sure you put that back pocket out of the way. I'm going to make sure that I'm not sewing on my back pocket. I'm going to put my presser foot, my needle down, presser foot down. Make sure that back pocket is out of the way. You are only doing the front. Check a second time to make sure everything is good. Make sure that your pocket is flat in the front as well. And what we're going to do is stitch starting at that dot that you have right here. Okay. And then I'm just going to back stitch. So, back stitch. Okay. I think I'm about 1/4 of an inch away. And then I'm going to lift up my presser foot. Okay. Pivot. Making sure it's still lined up with 1/4 of an inch. I'm a little off, but that's okay. So I'm just going to back it up one more time, one more again. Okay. And now I'm going to pivot. I'll take that part out. I'm going to pivot. It lines up with 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm just going to sew down the front. I'm going very slow so you could understand this process, because we know that sometimes the instructions doesn't make sense. So this is the only reason why I am showing you guys this, okay? And I'm going to sew all the way down to this dot that you see right there. So this dot right here, I'm going to sew all the way down to. Now that I'm close to the dot, I'm going to lift my presser foot, pivot one last time. And I'm going to sew again, sew across and back stitch. And that is it. All right, I'll meet you at the sewing table. All right, so now that I have the pocket stitched at 1/4 of an inch, just on the front, not on the back. I moved the back out of the way. I showed you that at the sewing machine. The next thing you're going to do is put the pockets together. So you have the right sides together. And we're going to baste the pockets all the way around. Now, I'm going to be basting mine at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I believe in the instructions it says 5/8 of an inch, but listen, you're going to have to take out the basting stitch no matter what. So it's just easier for me to do 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. But if you want to do 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, that is up to you. Now this portion right here is a personal preference, okay? So do whatever suits your fancy. So I'm going to pin all the way around. I'm going to pin the bottom as well, just like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the sewing machine base across the bottom and all the way around the top. So I'm just going to go from the top to the bottom, pivot, and then sew across the bottom. All right. I'm just basting, so I'm not going to be back stitching at the beginning and at the end, and I'm going to show you this at the sewing machine. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my pockets lined up with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm not going to back stitch, but I'm going to put my needle down, my presser foot down, and this is my 3/8 of an inch line, which I'm going to show you with the pin right here. I hope you guys could see that. And I'm just going to baste all the way around the pocket. Make sure you have a basting stitch all the way around the pockets and at the bottom of the pocket as well. So go ahead and baste that now. Now that I'm at the end, I'm going to cut my thread, lift my presser foot up, and I have basted that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off my seam allowance now. Do not cut off the seam allowance. Make sure you have your blade off at your serger so you could go ahead and finish off that seam allowance. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I did the slit marking right here, I also went ahead and sewn the pocket together. I actually basted it together and finished off the seam allowance. So the next thing you want to do is on the wrong side, as you see me doing, what I have already done, this is the wrong side. What I did was went ahead and pressed my seam allowance towards the pocket and pressed the pockets towards the front of my shirt, dress, whatever you want to call it, right? And then I have it pinned all the way around. Make sure it's flat to where it lays really nice on the front part. So what we're going to do, now that you see that I have it pinned to the front, I am going to base at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Now I'm going to base on the wrong side instead of the right side. There's a reason why I'm doing that, because the basting stitch will be pulled out when I go to top stitch. All right, I'm going to show you this at the sewing machine. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to baste this pocket in place. So I'm going to put my needle down, presser foot down. I'm not going to back stitch. I'm just going to baste it in place using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to pivot. Now around the curves, I would suggest going very, very slow, but that is completely up to you. Now that I have it basted all the way around, so now what I'm going to do is cut my threads, lift my presser foot, and that is what it looks like. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to flip it over and top stitch at, the first one's going to be at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and the second one's going to be at 1/4 of an inch. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so I have it basted. That's what it looks like. So now what I'm going to do, I turned it over to the right side, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to baste as close to the edge as possible. The first stitch is going to be at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to make sure I change my machine back to a regular length stitch. So I do apologize that it needs to get back in focus. And I'm going to do 3/8, so it's going to go over this basting stitch that I have right here, and it's perfectly fine because I'm going to take the basting stitch out once I'm done. So I'm going to go ahead, put my presser foot down, needle down, go ahead and back stitch just like so, and I'm going to sew this all the way around using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Go ahead and do that now. So now that I made it to the end, I'm going to go ahead and put my presser foot up. I'm going to pivot. And I'm going to sew the rest of the bottom portion at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. Go ahead and do that now. Now that I'm approaching the end, I'm going to back stitch, cut my threads, and do the same thing, but this time I'm going to go back to the top of the pocket, and I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch instead of 3/8 of an inch all the way around the pocket. Once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and remove that basting stitch. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the pocket right here top stitched all the way around, it looks good. A functioning pocket, like you could see there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to attach front to back at the shoulders. Now, if you did a second yoke back, you're going to do the burrito method. And what that essentially is going ahead and attaching with right sides together. So what you're going to do is you're going to need to do this just like this. So you have front to back at the shoulder seams just like this. All right. Just like you see me doing. Nothing different. Okay. Now, this is where the fun part happens. Then you're going to take this up and do it as a burrito method, right? You're going to have the back out. So you're going to have the back out and you're going to attach. You see how this is wrong side? I'm sorry, this is right side? Yes. So you're going to roll it up just like this and attach the second yoke to the wrong side of the front. Okay, so you're going to roll it up and attach the same one. Okay, now before you do that at the shoulder seam, you need to first go ahead and attach the bottom part of the yoke. What that means is you're going to attach, put this down and attach the yoke right sides together. So the right side to wrong side once again. And what should happen is both of your yokes should be wrong side. So wrong side to wrong side. So when you turn it out, it's going to show the right side on the inside, if that makes sense. Okay. So that's what you should be doing. Now I'm going to show you how to do the burrito method in a different video for a different top that I'm going to be doing. It's a Butterick pattern that I'm going to show you how to do that burrito method with a yoke that I will be doing. Okay. Now with this one, just to finish up tonight, this is day number 1. I'm going to do day number 2 tomorrow because I want to let this hang tonight. So this is the last part for tonight. All right, so what we're going to do is go ahead and attach at the shoulder. So go ahead and pin at that notch. Pin at the other notch as well. And then we're going to go ahead and pin all the way across. All right, so go ahead and pin your shoulder seams in place now. All right, so now that I have the shoulder seams pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, so across both shoulder seams, and then finish off your seam allowance and press your seam allowance towards the back of your shirt or shirt dress, whichever one you're doing. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the shoulder seams sewn together, so now what I'm gonna do, grab my handy dandy ironing board, and I'm gonna use, of course, my seam roll. You guys gotta get into the seam roll because it works miracles, okay? Ask the OGs, you know, about the seam roll life. I'm telling you, it makes your garment look really, really good. So I'm just gonna say don't sleep on using your seam roll instead of just pressing them flat. So I'm gonna go ahead and press my seam allowance towards the back using my seam roll of my shirt. I'm gonna do the other side the same way. All right, so I went ahead and gave both of my seam allowance a good press towards the back. So I'm just going to kind of show you what it's looking like right now. This is the end of day number 1. I'm going to pick up day number 2 with doing the collar, the neckband, and the sleeves. I don't know if I'm going to get to the buttons tomorrow, but if not, the buttons will be the last day. But you guys know you guys can do the buttons yourself. I'm just doing the construction for you. All right. But this is what it looks like so far. It's looking really good. I'm going to turn it onto the side so you're able to see this. All right. So let me turn it to the side real quick. All right. So this is what it's looking like so far. And I actually like this orange color fabric. I actually think it's cute. All right. So that's the end of day number 1. I'll pick up day number 2 tomorrow. Talk to you real soon. All right, welcome to day number 2. We've made a lot of progress on this top for hashtag hot girl summer, okay? Now, when you see this, it's gonna be in July. I'm just gonna put it like that. I have vacation coming up, so I'm gonna try to get this done. If not, it's gonna be kind of like 2 weeks later, almost 2 weeks later before we're done. So with that being said, this is day number 2. of this. Today is June the 30th. And we're going to try to get as much done as possible. Now, first thing we are going to do, I know in the instructions it tells us to do the collar and neckband. Before we do that, I want to go ahead and hem the bottom. I have tried this on. It's pretty long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpick the bottom where I did some basting stitches, I should say. So I'm going to pick that just a little bit. So let me move this up for you just a little bit. And I'm going to unpick just, if you sewn all the way down, unpick to you're about, I want to say like 2 inches. You don't have to unpick a lot, but you need to unpick enough to where you could turn the facing onto itself on both sides. So I'm just going to unpick probably about that much, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the facing and pin it onto itself. So I'm going to have to probably go up just a little bit more so I'm able to do that. And once you have taken out enough to where you could turn the facing onto itself and it'll be fine, then what we're going to do now, what it says in the instructions is that you're going to have it tucked under like this, kind of like this, and then you're going to basically do it that way. I don't like that way. I like clean finishes on mine. So what I'm going to do is turn it onto itself. So you have it folded in once, and then you know you have it folded in the second time. So I'm going to unfold it to where you just have it folded that one time, right? Right here. You just have it folded one time. And then I'm going to take that and fold it over onto itself to where it's like this. Then I'm going to pin it and sew across at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, okay? So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to pin it right here, okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side as well. I'm just going to unpick enough to go up to 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and unpick this side too if you need to. But if you I'm going to say if you have not sewn this down and you're just watching, make a note on your pattern that you want to leave about, I'm going to say 3 inches from the bottom open, so then you don't have to do what I am doing right now, okay? So go ahead and unpick now. All right, so now that I have this side unpicked, the same thing, I have the first one folded into that first clip, and then I'm gonna turn it onto itself. I'm gonna unpick it a little bit more because I wanna have enough room. And then I'm going to turn it onto itself just like this, right? And I'm going to sew at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, just right here at the bottom, okay? So I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end, all right? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my facing sewn onto itself, I'm going to clip off all the ends and axes and, you know, all the loose threads, I should say. Cut that off. So let me just clean it up just a little tad bit. All right, so now what I'm going to do, now that I have it sewn onto itself, just like this, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim it down just a little bit there and then come across like that, okay? I'm leaving like a L. If you think about it, like an upside down L, just like that, okay? You can see that? And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little L. So I'm going to snip right here. And I'm snipping off about 1/4 of an inch. I'm just trimming it down to about 1/4 of an inch to where I don't have any bulk right there when I turn it right side out, all right? So what you'll see is an upside down L. Okay, and I'm just going to clip all the loose threads as well. All right, so now you want to grab your point turner. So let me grab my point turner. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn it right side out like this. and it gives me a nice clean finish at the very bottom of my shirt. All right. Now, I created a 5/8 inch basting stitch right here. Let me bring it up so you can see it a little bit. All right. I created a 5/8 inch basting stitch because I'm going to press that up 5/8 inch seam allowance. Okay. Now, what you're going to do is starting where I told you to unpick. If you already stitched it down, you're going to finish that stitch all the way down to give that a clean finish. Make sure you press up 5/8 inch. I'm going to use my basting stitch. I'm going to press that in place, and then I'm going to top stitch all the way across. All right. Now on this side, I'm going to go ahead and turn it right side out as well. Use my point turner, and you're going to do the same thing. Finish off where you unpicked. Finish off all the way down. Okay. Now, one side you might have basting stitch, other side, you know, if you have basting stitch, go ahead and remove the basting stitch and make those permanent stitches now. Make sure you press up that hem as well and top stitch in place, or stitch it in place on the right side. All right. So I'm going to do that when I go back to my sewing machine. Okay. So let's go to the next part, which would be your collar and collar band. All right, so now that I have my hem completely done, okay, this is what it looks like. I have my placket area completely sewn in its entirety on both sides. I'm gonna move my shirt out of the way and grab my collar, because what I'm gonna do is the collar and the collar band. So go ahead and move the neckband out of the way. You just want to grab pattern piece number 6, which is your collar, and you need to have 2 with one of them being interfaced. All right. So what we're going to do is, with right sides together, we're going to pin both short edge and the long edge. Okay. So let me pin right sides together, and I'm going to pin all the way around both sides and the long edge. Okay, so you're pinning the area that does not have the notches. Okay, so go ahead and pin your collar in place now. All right, so now that I have the collar pinned using 3/8, now I'm going to bring the collar back so you can see. If you notice that right here it says 3/8 inch seam allowance, and right here it says 3/8 inch seam allowance. So the entire collar is going to be sewn at 3/8 inch seam allowance instead of 5/8. So using 3/8 inch seam allowance, you're going to sew both side seams and the bottom. Okay, so it's not the section that has the notches, it's just both sides and the bottom. All right, so go ahead and do that. Now we're going to back stitch at the beginning and sew all the way across and back stitch at the end. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so we're going to sew the collar using 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I have my needle down, my presser foot down. I'm going to back stitch. I have it lined up with 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning. And I'm just going to sew all the way down until I get within 3/8 inch seam allowance before I turn it. All right, so go ahead and do that now. So I'm about 3/8 inch away. I'm going to pull up my presser foot, line it up again with 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to sew all the way across. And as you are approaching the end of that corner within 3/8 inch seam allowance, lift your presser foot up, put it back down, and you're going to sew all the way down to the end and back stitch at the end. Now what we're going to do is trim it down and turn it right side out. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my collar sewn together, I'm going to go ahead and trim it down just like this to about 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm gonna clip into the corners without clipping through my stitches on both sides. And then I'm going to turn it right side out. Make sure you have your point turner. And I'm gonna poke out my corners. And I'm gonna do the other side the exact same way. And then go to your pressing station and give this a good press to where it'll stay in place. So go ahead and press this down to where your seam allowance needs to be pressed towards the facing, okay? And then just give that a good press. Go ahead and do that now, and then we'll come back and continue. All right, so now that I have my collar pressed, now what you want to do is grab your neck bands, which is pattern piece number 7. And once again, the top and the bottom is at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, just like the collar, okay? Now, just make sure that you know you need to cut, you should have cut 2 of fabric, 1 of interfacing for your neckband as well, all right? Now, if you notice, you will see 1 of the orange fabric and 1 of, you know, basically scrap fabric. If you missed my video of the Cami, this was the fabric I used for the Cami. I also used this fabric for pants. So I made a Cami dress, and a pair of pants, and I have some left over to use as facing for the neckband. All right, so it works out perfectly. Now, what you want to do, now listen to me very, very carefully, okay? So what you want to do is you want to put this one that's not, well, first of all, let me tell you, on the neckband, that's the facing, that doesn't have the interfacing, right? You want to press up 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's what you see here, all right? 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I just created a basting stitch at the bottom and then pressed it up 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, okay? Now, the one that's interfaced, you want to put down on the table, okay? Now grab your collar, and the side that's not interfaced, you want to put that right on top, all right? So I have done this so many times on every time I make a button down shirt, I do my collar this way because it's pretty much fail proof, okay? So what I'm going to do is put that down, and then I'm going to put the neckband that's not interfaced, which serves as your neckband facing. I'm going to put that on top. So it's going to be sandwiched, all right? Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pin at the notches. Now, listen to me very closely. You want to pin, and then you're going to repin once you put your neckband facing on, okay? Now, the edge, the end of your collar should match up with these 2 dots, okay? So you know that that's the end of your collar, just like that, okay? And you're going to pin on both sides. So I'm going to pin this side over here. All right, so I did that. So you have your facing neckband with the facing, and that is touching the uninterfaced collar. And then you have your collar, which is facing up, and you're going to put your other neckband, which is the neckband facing, onto your collar, all right? So now all I'm going to do is repin at the notch. Just repin all of that in place, all the way across. So go ahead and pin your neckband facing onto your collar now, just repinning. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that I have it pinned all the way around, matching up the edge, and make sure that it is pressed up all the way around the facing one, the neckband facing, okay? So I'm just going to put some pins at the very top, so do the same thing to keep it all in place. All right, so now that I have it pinned all the way across, using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, I'm going to start right here, back stitch at the beginning, sewing slowly around this curve. I'm going to sew around the curve, sew all the way across, and then end at this side, all right, and back stitch at the end. So let's go ahead to the sewing machine using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end. Then we're going to trim it down. Let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so what we're going to do is start at the beginning. I'm going to put my presser foot down. And using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to backstitch. I'm going to sew pretty slow. Backstitch. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm lined up with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, sewing slowly around that curve. So now that I pretty much made it across that curve, I'm going to sew just a tad bit slower. And now I'm going to sew all the way across. Since I made it around that curve, I'm going to sew all the way across until I get to the other curve. So go ahead and do that now. So now that I'm approaching the curve again, I'm going to go very slow and make sure that it's still lined up with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you do not sew across those pins. And I'm going to go very slowly, once again, making sure that the bottom is still pressed up. Since I'm approaching the end, I'm going to backstitch. Cut my threads, and that's what it looks like, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and trim it down and turn it right side out. Let's go ahead to the sewing table so we can do that now. All right, so now that we have our neckbands attached to our collar, it looks really good. I have not turned it out just yet because we're going to go ahead and pin. You can, if you want, just like this. And make sure you grab your point turner and poke out any corners. You can give it a press if you want to as well, but I'll do that in just a moment. Now, I'm just going to keep mine just like this for a quick second. And the reason why is because we're going to take our collar and neckband and attach it to our shirt. So grab your shirt just like this. And we're going to take the portion that's interface, all right, with right sides together. You should have 2 notches right here, and that matches up to the back of your shirt, and you're going to pin, all right? So pin there, all right? Now this dot match up to that shoulder seam, so you want to pin there at the shoulder seam and make sure that your seam allowance is pressed towards the back of your garment, and you're gonna pin there, okay? Make sure you pin the other notch. If you have not done so already, pin that in place there. And then the other dot's gonna go to the other side seam, so you want to pin there. Making sure that the seam allowance is pressed towards the back of your garment and not towards the front. All right. Now you should have 2 dots right here, and that's going to match up to the front of your shirt, just like this, okay? So you want to make sure that the ends are matching up as well. And then you're just going to pin where you need to. If you need to make clips, you can as well. Make sure that you make clips to where it fits onto the neck edge with no issues and no problems, okay? So go ahead and do that now. Now, one thing I want to mention is this part needs to match up with that dot right there. So that's where that goes, okay? It doesn't go anywhere else. Just make sure you match up that dot. And I'm going to turn it this way so I could see it really good. And it's going to meet up with that dot, okay? So that front seam needs to match up with that dot. You probably can't see it, but just make sure that you try to do your best and match it up the best of your ability, okay? And then I'm going to pin. And then I'm going to do the other side the same way, making sure you keep your neckband facing out of the way as much as possible, okay? So go ahead and pin the other side the exact same way. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the neckband attached to the shirt using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch. We're going to back stitch at the beginning, so all the way across, and back stitch at the end. You're only sewing this part, so make sure that you have your neckband facing out of the way. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so I have my neckband and collar lined up with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning. And then just follow the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around your neckband. So go ahead and sew your neckband in place now. Now I'm inching up towards the end, so I'm going to go ahead and sew slow and then back stitch at the end. Cut my threads. And that's what it looks like. So let's go over to the sewing table so we can finish up. All right, so now that I have the neckband and collar attached, sewn on, now what we're gonna do is go ahead, I told you to grab your point turner, poke out your corners of your neckband. And then what we're going to do is we're gonna make sure that the shirt seam allowance is pressed up. And we're going to make sure that the neckband is about 1/8 of an inch over that seam line. Now, if you want to put a label in your garment, go ahead and do so now on the facing before you attach it. Because once you attach it, baby, you're not going to be able to do it. So I'm going to do mine before I attach it. But I just wanted to show you that you're going to put it about 1/8 of an inch over. And then you're going to pin. Now, I like to pin on the inside because I'm just going to baste it first. And then after I baste it all the way to make sure that it catches, then I'm going to stitch in the ditch and clean up all the stitching right here, okay? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the neckband sewn on, it looks good on the inside and good on the outside. Now what we're gonna do, we're gonna move this off to the side because the only thing left to do are the sleeves. Now, if you do not want sleeves, you can do some bias tape around your armhole and wear it sleeveless. You can do that as well, but because, you know, your girl wants some sleeves, so we're gonna go ahead and move this off to the side and create our sleeves. Y'all like that accent on the inside? You may wanna think about doing this on your tops, okay? So grab your sleeves, pattern piece number 8. Make sure you move pattern piece number 9, your sleeve band, out of the way. And what we're gonna do with pattern piece number 8, we're going to stay stitch in between these 2 dots. So you have 2 dots right here, and we're gonna stay stitch in between them. So let me move one out of the way. But first, what I need to do is go ahead and mark the wrong side of my fabric. So I'm gonna grab my white pencil and mark the wrong side of my fabric so I know what side is the wrong side. And then I'm gonna go to the sewing machine, and right here where you have these 2 dots, okay, you're just gonna stitch across those 2 dots and then clip to the dots without clipping through it. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it stitched across right here, now I have the wrong side facing up. That's why you see the number 8 right here, like as you can see right there, okay? So this is the wrong side facing up. I'm gonna press to that stitching line, and then I'm gonna press it in again and top stitch close to the edge on the right side, all right? And then after I do that, I'm gonna make 2 rows of stitching at the very bottom. I'm gonna make the first one at 3/8 of an inch, basting stitch, use the basting stitch, and we're going to create a basting stitch for gathers. The first one I'm going to do at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and the second one I'm going to do at 1/2 an inch on both sides. I'm going to start at the beginning all the way to the end. Make sure that you stop within 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides, okay? So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have this pressed under, I have it stitched, and I also have my basting stitch, 2 rows of basting stitches in order to gather. The next thing I'm gonna do is sew my underarm seam, so with the right sides together. I'm going to pin at this notch, pin at the top, and then pin along the underarm seam. So go ahead and pin your underarm seams now. All right, so now that I have the underarm seams pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew along the entire underarm seam. Once you do that, go ahead and finish it off and press your seam allowance to the back of your sleeve. The back of your sleeves will be where you have the 2 notches, all right? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned, what I'm gonna do is go ahead and sew the underarm seam. So let me grab my pins, and I'm going to line my seam allowance up with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch. And I'm gonna sew all the way down to the end. Back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. So go ahead and sew your seam now. Now that at the end, I'm gonna go ahead and back stitch, cut my threads, and this is what it looks like. Now I'm gonna go ahead and finish off my seam allowance and press it towards the back. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the underarm seam sewn and finished off, I have it pressed towards the back. That's why you see the 2 notches right here that symbolize the back. I went ahead and gathered around my sleeve cap for when I put my sleeve into my armscye, and the bottom is gathered as well. So the next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and work on our sleeve band that will be attached to the bottom of our sleeves. Now I'm gonna show you what it looks like because I have already done one, of course. And it's gonna make a little tie bow at the end of the sleeve, okay? So that's what we're going to do. I already have one already in the sleeve, so we're gonna do the other one. And then after we do that, we are all done, okay? So this is the last part. So the first thing you wanna do is turn your sleeve right side out. And now what you want to do is kind of move your sleeve off to the side, but not too far. Grab your sleeve band. And if you notice that on your sleeve band it says cut 2, make sure you have 2. Of course, I have 2, but I have already done one, so I'm only gonna have 1. And make sure you have your dots and your notches, okay? Now, what you're going to do is you have 2 dots. So you have 2 dots right here, and you have 2 dots right here. Now you probably can't see it simply because it's been a week or 2 since I started working on this again. So now today is the 12th. Welcome to day number 3, but it's been about 2 weeks later, okay? Since we did day number 2, all right? So today is July the 12th. Yeah, I've been on vacation and everything like that. The last time I worked on this, I believe it was like the 28th or something like that. But it doesn't matter. We're gonna go ahead and get it done. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to match up the dots. So first things first, you want to match up the notch. So you have a notch and a dot. And you want to make sure you have right sides together. So I'm going to match up the dot and the notch. And one thing you want to make sure when you do this is you have one end. So you're going to match up the first dot. The dot is right here. So you're going to match that up and the dots, and you're going to pin. Now you can pin on the inside. That's kind of like what I'm going to do. Now, a couple of things I'm going to mention real quick is that you can gather. That's what the gathering stitches is for, if you need to gather. I like to gather as I'm going instead of gather all at once. So I'm gonna make sure that I am gathering where I need to, okay? If you do not need to gather, that's perfectly fine. But I just don't like to gather before I start pinning things on because you could end up having way too much gather. So that's just a tip I'm gonna give you. I'm just pulling my gathering stitches up, the thread at least, to the front, okay? All right, so I have my thread, and if I need to gather, I will do so, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I do the same thing on the other side, making sure right sides are together. And there's a notch right here, so I'm going to take that notch and line it up with the other notch and the dot. Okay, so there's a notch right here and a dot, and I'm going to pin that as well. All right. And then just make sure you adjust your gathers all the way around your sleeve and your sleeve band. Okay. Some places you may have to gather, other places you may not. So, you know, adjust your gathers accordingly. So I'm just going to do that on mine. All right, so now that I have it pinned all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the first dot, and so all the way around, and then back stitch at the other dot. Once you do that, you want to press your seam allowance towards the sleeve band. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my seam allowance of my sleeve armhole, I'm gonna try to zoom it in so you can see it a little bit more. And what we're going to do is I have it underneath my presser foot. I have it lined up with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at the dot. And then I'm going to sew all the way around until I get to the other dot, and then back stitch at the end, going as slowly as possible. So go ahead and sew all the way along that 5/8 of an inch line now. All right, so now that I have it sewn all the way around, we're going to go ahead and give this a trim and a press. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the sleeve band sewn onto the sleeves, the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and trim it down. I'm going to just trim it down just a little bit, not much, but you know what? Before I trim it down, I'm just going to trim it down just a little bit, not much. I'm going to just kind of trim it down just a little bit. Make sure you are not clipping through the stitching, all right? It's just I don't like bulk, so that's why I'm trimming mine down just a little bit. All right, so now that I have it trimmed down, the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to make pretty much the ties for the sleeve band. And how you're gonna do that is with right sides together, you're going to match dot to dot. So you have a dot there and you're going to pin, okay? So you're going to match up those two dots that you have on the sleeve band, all right? So I'm just gonna do right sides together. I'm going to turn this over so you could pretty much see it. And what we're going to do is we're going to pin. Okay, so I'm going to have this like this. And then I'm just going to pin, making sure that you have the raw edges pin, if that makes sense. Okay, so move all the loose threads out of the way, and we're going to pin both of the dots together. So let me trim this off right here so I can see my dots, okay? I want to see my dots. All right. So I'm going to pin right there at the dot. And then I'm going to pin all the way down and across the front portion of the sleeve band. So go ahead and pin the sleeve band together with right sides together now. So go ahead and pin that now on both sides. All right, so now that I have one side pinned, I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side the exact same way. I'm gonna pin dot to dot and then pin all the way down the seam of the ties. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and turn it so I could see the dots and pin all the way down as well. matching up the raw edges. So go ahead and pin there now. All right, so now that I have it pinned on this side as well, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to start at the short end. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning, sew across. Once I get within 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to pivot and sew all the way to this dot and then back stitch, all right? So I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning, back stitch at the end, and then I'm gonna do the same thing to the opposite side, starting at the dot using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the dot, sew all the way down, then pivot across, still using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're gonna pivot across as well. Then we're gonna trim it down and turn it right side out and give it a press. So let's go ahead and do all of that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put my needle down, press her foot down. I have it lined up with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance right here. I'm going to go ahead, go slowly over the dot, back stitch at the dot, and then still sewing using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way down until I get towards the bottom within 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and sew your ties down now. Now that I'm within 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna lift my presser foot. I'm gonna turn it or pivot. And now I'm going to sew and back stitch at the end, all right? Now I'm hoping you can see that because it's zooming in and out. And this is what it looks like. Okay, I'm going to do the other side the exact same way. All right, so now I'm going to trim down my seam allowance and then turn it right side out. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my ties sewn, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little snip to right here, and I'm going to trim it down, not to have so much bulk. So I'm going to turn it right side out. So go ahead and turn this right side out now. All right, so now that I have one side pretty much pulled out, I'm going to take my point turner and pretty much make sure it is pushed out really good. Do the other side the other way. Do the other side the same way, turning it right side out, and then go to your ironing station and give it a press. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the ties turned right side out, it's looking good. I went ahead and pressed probably about a good 1/4 of an inch under between the dots. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we go about 1/8 of an inch over the stitching line for the sleeves. And make sure you pin. Now I'm going to be pinning on the wrong side because y'all know how I'm going to do. I'm going to baste it all the way across to make sure it catch and then stitch on the right side. Okay. So I'm hoping you can see this really good. And what I'm going to do is just make sure I'm about 1/8 of an inch over the stitching line. And I'm just going to pin on the inside just like so all the way across, making sure that I catch the pressed edge under, okay? So go ahead and do that now. And then we're gonna go to the sewing machine and baste and then top stitch on the right side, okay? Now, I'm not gonna show you how to do this, because do that at the sewing machine because you should know how to baste at this point. And I have showed this before on how to stitch in the ditch before, okay? So you should know how to do that. So just go ahead and pin. If you want to do it this way, if you're fine with not basting first and just slip stitching on the right side, go ahead and do whatever suits your fancy, okay? You know what you like to do. All right, so now that I have it pinned all the way across, I'm just going to go ahead and baste as close to the edge as possible, and then I'm going to top stitch along the right side of the fabric and then give it a press. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the ties completely done, it's looking good on the inside, it's stitched all the way around on the outside. I went ahead and kind of tied it right there to keep it out of my way. Now what I want you to do is go ahead and pull up some gathers at the sleeve cap. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to attach our sleeves to our shirt. Okay, so everything else on your shirt should be done if you followed along with me thus far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have right sides together. I'm going to open up this armhole, or open it out, I should say. And what I'm going to do now, you guys know I like to do the flat method, but because I already did my side seams, I can't do it this time, all right? Because I did not leave an opening for my side seams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my underarm seams are matching and my seam allowance is pressed towards the back of my garment. That's where you have the double notches. And I'm going to go ahead and pin at the underarm seam. I'm going to pin at those double notches right here, which symbolize the back. And then I'm going to pin at that front notch right here, which symbolize the front of your shirt. And I'm going to definitely put some pins in between to keep it all together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sleeve and kind of flip it to where I could maneuver a little bit more. Now the next thing I'm going to look for is the center of my sleeve. I have a dot, so just kind of, you know, adjust your gather so you can find your dot that goes to the top of your sleeve cap. All right. So I found mine, and what I'm going to do is turn it to where I could see it really good. And my dot is right here. You probably can't see it because it is a little faded. I'm going to go ahead and pin that there. And then the only thing I need to do is adjust my gathers all the way around and pin. So what I'm going to do is adjust my gathers, and I'm going to pin all the way around my sleeve cap. All right. So go ahead and pin your sleeve into your arm's eye area now, adjusting the gather. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned all the way around, I'm going to start at the underarm seam using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning, so all the way around, and back stitch at the end. After you do that, go ahead and finish off your seam allowance. Let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and stitched the sleeve into the arm's eye, the entire top is done. Well, not necessarily. It's done, but it's not done. So the only thing left for you to do is do your buttonholes. So you should be putting on 6 buttons total. You should have 5 going down and then 1 across the top. Now I decided to add an extra button, so I'm gonna have 7 buttons. So that's why you see a total of 6 going all the way down, and then 1's gonna be at the top. Now, if you don't want that buttonhole right there, you don't have to create it, but I'm going to put mine there just in case I want to wear a tie or something like that with it. Like, I know you're saying like, who in the heck want to wear a tie? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't know. Or maybe I want to button it up all the way or something, okay? So I will definitely create my buttonhole here and then create my buttonholes all the way down there. After you create your buttonholes, you're going to put your buttons on. I'm going to show you what mine look like. I don't know if I want to use these orange or if I want to use brown buttons. I think I'm going to use these orange. It's not completely the right color, but it is going to do what it needs to do, okay? So after you make your buttonholes, put on your buttons, I'm going to wash my top and press it and then take some photos. Now, I want to show you something real quick. So I have showed this already for the pattern hackathon and Hot Girl Summer. That, of course, I hosted Hot Girl Summer, but it's still going on to the end of July for July 31st. So I'm going to pair this top with these pants, okay, for Hot Girl Summer. A look. I also created a kimono as part of the pattern hackathon. If you missed the sew along for the kimono, I will go ahead and put it up here and in the description box below and on the end screen. I'm gonna go ahead and put the entire playlist to the pattern hackathon as well. But this is the kimono, so you can see the pants, the top, the kimono, and then I have the cami as well. So I'm gonna pair all of these together so you can have like a quick lookbook on how I would pair all of these things together, all right? Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. So we sewed together New Look 6561. I actually love this top and how it came out, but if you make this top shirt, or you can use this as battle of the shirt dress as well, because that's what I'll be using it for. But if you make New Look 6561, please do not forget to tag me here on YouTube at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs or on Instagram as well. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Until the next sew along. All right, so there you have it. That is the complete pattern review and sew along. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you make this, please do not forget to tag me in your video or your photos on Instagram or here on YouTube at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. So I'll catch you in the next video, and as always, keep sewing. And don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe button. Also, smash that notification bell so you are notified every time your girl uploads a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video, and as always, keep sewing.
My hair stay laid